Hi everyone, Nick here from Conservation Careers and welcome to the podcast. Scotland is a land of breathtaking beauty. From its rugged coast to misty glens and its rich biodiversity and wild spaces. But like all places we love, it needs care, commitment and community to keep it that way. In this episode, we're joined by Barry Fisher, who's the Chief Executive of Keep Scotland Beautiful, the environmental charity on a mission to inspire action for a clean, green, sustainable Scotland. Together we explore what makes Scotland so special, especially for wildlife, and why it can't be taken for granted. Barry shares the charity's current strategy and how they work with partners across government, schools, businesses and communities, and how they're tackling issues like biodiversity loss, climate change and waste. We also explore Barry's personal journey from youth development to leading a national charity, and what it's really like to be a CEO in the conservation space. He reflects on the challenges and rewards of leadership, what success looks like for him, and the pivotal career moments that shaped his path. So whether you're based in Scotland or just love the idea of community-powered environmental action, this conversation offers insight, inspiration, and real-world examples of conservation in action. It's a reflective, a practical, and optimistic episode. Enjoy.
I'm Barry Fisher. I'm the Chief Executive of the national environmental charity in Scotland called Keep Scotland Beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your time with us today. And we're looking forward to kind of hearing about your work and the organisation as well. Yeah. Where to start? Now, we have an international audience here at Conservation Careers. So maybe for people who haven't visited Scotland, and don't really know the country or its scenery or indeed the wildlife as well, can you just sort of paint us a picture about why is Scotland or what is beautiful about Scotland indeed?
What a great question to answer, Nick. Thanks for that. We can knock that one out of the park. I mean, I think, I've lived all my life in Scotland, but I've had the great privilege of traveling. So particularly by sea, and you might want to talk about that. I've sailed halfway around the world. I'll maybe get to sail the other half at some point. And I realized just how much I probably took for granted as a young person that, what an incredible place that I live. We've got incredible seascapes, mountain environment, very remote habitations, still, some wildlife, wilderness areas in Scotland. We're still hanging on to them. But we've also got very thriving, busy cities, European cities that are very well connected through transport. So places like Edinburgh, obviously internationally known as a great destination for people to visit, that incredible built heritage that goes with it. But I think one of the features of Scottish cities in particular is that connection to nature. In Glasgow, for instance, a city I know very, very well, having lived there for 4 years, 45 minutes later, you could be at one end of Loch Lomond, sitting having a coffee, looking at the mountain views. And I think, inevitably, and I'm sure other people listening to this will say the same about their own country, we take it for granted, but it really is a great place to live and work.
Yeah, absolutely stunning country. Yeah. And when I think about Scotland, I'm English down in England, but, I think about the remoteness of St Kilda and Shetland and some of the huge diversity of wildlife and landscapes and cultures you've got. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned St Kilda. I've had the fortunate happenstance to have gone 3 times, Nick.
Have you?
And it is I actually think it's an incredible kind of metaphor in some ways for the country that for hundreds and hundreds of years this community of people lived out in the middle of the Atlantic. For those listening, it's some 45 miles west of the remote islands of the Western Isles, right into the Atlantic. Yeah. People lived there for thousands of years and adapted to that incredibly hostile environment. But it was actually tourism that actually brought that community to an end in terms of the way of living, partly because they were exposed to a sense of what living in the mainland could be and could be better. And people were constantly telling them that they were living in very difficult circumstances, whereas the reality was they thought they were living in perfectly reasonable circumstances. Yeah. And the kind of really weird coda to that whole story about St Kilda, Nick, is when that community moved to the Scottish, what's called mainland, the place they actually moved to was actually still fairly remote. They were treated as refugees, sometimes are badly treated today, and they felt homesick. And then it's an incredible story actually, which I urge people to listen to this podcast, apart from the extraordinary natural habitat that's in Kildare, you'll know that it's famously a bird life sanctuary.
Absolutely.
Incredible statistics of nesting birds there. Sort of incredibly important place from nature perspective. And of course, the soy sheep, which there's some controversy around that at the moment in terms of they are very much left as a species to their own device. And of course, that means sometimes they die in fairly awful circumstances, but actually it's a really interesting concept that they're just self-sustaining. So fascinating place.
Yeah.
Incredibly remote part of our country. So it's a great example of the special environment we were brought here.
Isn't it? Yeah. And shows the connection between people and wildlife actually perfectly. Yeah.
Indeed,
They used to
100%.
live and survive on the seabirds, didn't they? And yeah.
100%.
Tell us a little bit about Keep Scotland Beautiful then, if you could please, Barry. Like, what's your mission as a charity? And what are maybe some of the big kind of environmental challenges or broader challenges that you're seeking to tackle?
Yeah, well, we've had the great privilege of being around. Our history dates back to about the 1960s, very much part of a United Kingdom-wide organisation. And then when the devolution happened in our country, as you remember, Nick, back in 1999 or 97, we became our own independent charity. So there's loads of charities in Scotland celebrating their 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
We weren't unusual. So technically, we're 25 years old this year.
Yeah.
I guess we want our mission statements for Scotland to be cleaner, and be much more fuller of nature.
Yeah.
So our objectives are not necessarily unusual to anyone on this call in terms of we want to combat climate change. We are very much interested, particularly in reducing litter and waste, restoring nature and biodiversity, which is, I think Scotland has had, I think the statistic is 25% reduction in its nature, quite significant. But we still retain an interest, and I think people will find it slightly unusual, but an interest in place and how places are better places to be. The short way of describing that, I think, is where people are better connected to where they live, where they feel a greater sense of connection, a greater sense of ownership. Actually, they're much more likely to want to take care of it and be invested in it, from whether that's a nature perspective or a litter and pollution perspective. So we really play on it, as a terrible phrase, but we really want people to feel that connection. We want them to love where they live.
Yeah.
And then by doing so, that kind of, whether it's a community or indeed a business, the power that comes from that, and I guess I'm sure many of your listeners will understand that. It's probably worth, maybe if you're happy, just to sort of describe the kind of 4 teams that we've got. We're not a massive organization. We have around 45 staff.
Yep.
But we have 4 distinct teams, and I think that points to really the kind of key things that we're about. So the first thing I would describe as our education team. We're very privileged to deliver the international program Eco Schools, which will be familiar again to many of your international listeners. But we are also fortunate the Scottish Government structurally fund us to deliver that program to as many schools in Scotland that we can. Now, numbers fluctuate, but we do think that we're reaching about 2/3 of all schools in Scotland, and we're incredibly proud of that work.
Wow. Yeah.
And we really focus a lot on supporting teachers and educators and young people to in effect not drive a curriculum at them, tell them what to do, but build their capacity to talk about the local issues that they have. So whatever the issues around litter and pollution or nature and biodiversity in an urban environment in Scotland is separate to what it would be in a fairly remote environment. We want those schools and those young people to feel particularly confident about looking after that themselves.
Yeah.
Delighted to say that with recent investment again from the Scottish Government, we've been able to increase our education programme through the medium of Scottish Gaelic. It's very much an Indigenous language.
Yeah.
Again, that's been a fascinating programme, Nick, because actually the people who speak Gaelic in Scotland, which sadly has diminished greatly over the years, but they are going through a current conversation, we understand, between themselves about what language they've got just now, what historic words they may have used to describe the certain concept, particularly around climate, or whether they need to adopt a sort of English the English words that we talk about. So, but actually, we know, and again, many listeners will understand, if you can talk about it in your own language, that's much more powerful. It doesn't feel so abstract or remote. So really, really proud of that over the last couple of years, and that's developing beautifully in the way it should. The next team we have, we'll talk to you about, is our communities team.
Yep.
And it may be a surprise to listeners. Actually, one of the biggest things we do in that space is working through heritage. So working with community-based groups who are again enthused, inspired by the local heritage, but actually thinking about how climate change particularly is affecting that. So buildings, built heritage can be destroyed, but even particularly the natural heritage, as we know, is changing enormously at the moment. Whether that's to do with flooding or it's to do with temperature differentials and the different types of species that are flourishing.
Yeah.
It's been really, really powerful, actually. That's a very big program for us, a very furtive and creative program where communities are enjoying discussing what it means to them very much in a local space. Also within our communities team, incredibly proud of what we call our Beautiful Scotland program. Beautiful Scotland is around 250 to 300 groups in Scotland, normally based around villages and towns, and indeed some of our bigger cities. And these are groups of volunteers who are taking active steps to improve their local environment, to tackle litter and waste, get out there, do litter picks and remove those items from our streets and from our towns and villages, but go that step further and decide that they want it to be a nicer aesthetic place to live. And so they're planting flowers, they're planting trees, but they're also contributing enormously, I think, to that, or connecting people, particularly local people, back to some of that nature depletion that we all know is quite a big issue. So that's our community-based work. We also have a campaigns team. Now they're largely focused on, I guess, what Keep Scotland Beautiful has been traditionally known for, which is tackling litter in this country. And I'm afraid Scotland's statistics around litter are as terrible as probably lots of other countries in the world. But we certainly take that issue incredibly seriously. Some of that is popular campaigning work and motivating people, communities, organizations, and businesses to do something about it, literally go out and pick up some litter. But we're also trying to tackle the issue, if you like, from the source. So we are engaged in the space around the circular economy, but also trying to connect people to what can be quite a jargon-filled environment. So what does a circular economy mean to a person on the street who's struggling with the cost of living and all sorts of other issues in their life? How do we make that meaningful and active and easy so it becomes just a habit? And of course, around the world, there are fantastic examples of organized, particularly communities that are recycling more, they're repurposing material. And I guess a big part of what we try and do at Keep Scotland Beautiful is make it fun, make it engaging, make it something that people want to do rather than making it so complex, so abstract that actually it's too difficult to work out how you would get on board with that. So that's a large part of what our campaigns team do. Spearheaded by the Spring Clean Scotland campaign last year, nearly 40,000 people over a month got up, decided to do something about the litter in the environment. And of course, throughout the year, thousands of people are doing it. So really proud of that work.
Yeah.
The final team we've got, and I'll come up for breath after this, Nick, is our Environment in Place team. Now, within that team, there's a huge amount of auditing work. So there's a huge amount of literally people measuring, the quality of our local environment, but working with organizations, sometimes quite often businesses, to accredit what they're doing. We know that business is very much, or I certainly feel this, very much part of the solution. They have to be. And we've got some great programs, for instance, the international program Green Key, which is a program for the hospitality sector, rewarding and acknowledging where that industry are really committed to making improvements to their practices. Not just about carbon reduction, and sometimes we always go to that space, and whilst that's important, what I like about the program, we also look at how you are making a contribution within your own community. So can you make your supply chain smaller? Can you buy local? Can you work off each other and make that impact tourism, which as we know is seeing some controversy certainly over the last year. How can it make better connections? And I'm delighted to say, I think we've really highlighted some excellent examples. We also deliver a huge program of training from that team. We deliver carbon literacy or climate emergency training, nature and biodiversity training, and we've recently just added circular economy training. What we're not delivering, Nick, is an MSc in environmental science. What we're trying to do is create programs of learning so people can understand first level, if you will, foundation level, whatever phrase works for you, but not making the mistake, I think, of assuming people know what you're talking about. So climate emergency training, I think, is talking to people who might not be talking about the climate, who are working in a job and are being told by their company that this is important to them, but they haven't been put it into context before. So thinking about what you can do as an individual as much as what you can do through your role within that organization. Similarly, we band around the phrase a green solution a lot to business, but I think sometimes we haven't explained potentially to the people working in these organizations, why is your company interested in this stuff? Why is it planting trees? Why is it thinking about different ways in which it can use its space, its estates, if you will, better, rather than just having it big, factory with big grass areas? Can we think differently about how we can use that space much more effectively? And then finally, in terms of our circular economy training, we've literally just trialed it, so it's hot off the press. I'm waiting for the evaluation on that. But again, building the capacity of that incredibly interesting network of organizations that are taking materials that people thought were not useful anymore, and they're repurposing them. And I'm a great believer in that, and I may have done a bit of that myself. The other thing that team does is also celebrate. We think it's incredibly important to celebrate the small and the large steps that people take. So we're in that space. We operate the Scottish Beach Award program, a green flag for parks, municipal parks program, again, recognizing where people are making huge strides in terms of the work that they're doing. So I hope that's a reasonable fly through the organization, but it's not been too much information.
No, I would say that was incredible, actually. Yeah, really nice, clear overview of the breadth and scale of work that you're doing. I'm impressed that 45 people can have that much impact. Now, I know a lot is done through volunteers and partnerships and so forth, but it feels like there's a few people achieving a lot within it. And what stood out for me as I was listening to you as well, I was just sort of jotting down words that really kind of seem to kind of be threads throughout all your work. One was like localness. That feels really important. It's about meeting people where they are. We talked about that just before the recording, actually, and building pride in where you are, whether that's an urban setting or whether it's or whatever that might be. And then that kind of connection to community. And sort of working in partnership with others. They, correct me if I'm wrong, but they seem really important to what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think they're really important to me personally. We might come on to that when we possibly talk about my journey, but I see it's almost exemplified by, and this might be controversial to your listeners, does it matter that people are talking about climate? Or does it matter that they're doing the thing that make the steps that are better? We can see environmental improvements. And I guess I'm in the latter category. I think possibly we forget just how busy people are, just how many other priorities they have in their lives. And then we add on sometimes in the environmental sector concepts that could be quite abstract, but we're not connecting them. And I think that's where litter can be quite visceral as an issue. Now, some people call it litter, some people call it pollution. And I think now we're having to call it litter pollution because that's what the UN are using. But fundamentally, we know that if we've created places where people live, all of which are, I don't know, heated by air source heat pumps, and outside every one of these homes is an electric car, but the local park is full of cans and crisp packets, what have we learned? So I think that connection of starting with something like what's going on in your local area leads inevitably to conversations that could be talking about climate adaptation around increased water levels in rivers. But I wouldn't lead with that. I think that's sometimes where our sector and our organization can be accused of making mistakes in the past. And I think we're very keen just to meet people where they are, talk about what matters to them, through the lens that matters. We talked just earlier about heritage, and I think that's an example of what that looks like. What matters to them, how we connect them to their place better, and then we can talk about everything else that follows from that. So yeah, I think that sense of localism, I can't connect as an individual to some of those concepts around, melting ice caps.
Yep.
I could do something about something within 100 yards of my house or 100 meters within my house. I think that's really important to give people a sense of optimism.
Yep.
That they can take a piece of this enormous puzzle.
Yep.
It's a big jigsaw, but let's start with a couple of pieces and get them together.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and sometimes some of the big issues that we're facing, you're talking there about climate change and melting ice cap, it's almost too big. People just bury their head in the sand, and it's, whereas actually you're enabling people to do something quite local and then build momentum from that. Yeah, I mean, as a charity, you're seeking to change behaviours. That's the bottom line of what you're trying to do, and something that I think the wildlife conservation sector more generally is struggling with. Yeah, like how do we preach to the unconverted? Yeah, how do we reach people who don't care? And it's, they've got other things to concern themselves with, quite rightly. Yeah. So what are you learning more generally about actually, reaching and connecting with people about behavior change, about making, a positive impact on the environment? You talked eloquently there about, small steps, things locally. Are there other things we should bear in mind that might be, beneficial to other organizations?
I mean, there's just to sort of finish up the kind of the where people are. I got a really interesting. Well, I thought it was interesting to me, so I'll share it with you. So this is a polling of the Green Party members in England.
Yep.
And I think England and Wales. Forgive me, you'll probably know better than me, Nick. The environment is their third most important issue. It's not the first or second.
Wow.
It's the third.
Yep.
Like, it's a snapshot. It's a poll. It's a thing. But that sense of cost of living, the challenges that people have in their own personal lives and health continue to be those important. Now, sometimes I can hear, maybe some of my colleagues might say, but the environment's incredibly important. It might be, but to reach them, to reach that issue, we might need to put it through the lens of cost of living or health.
Yeah.
So we know that.
Yeah.
I think if you wanted to be clever, you call it green prescribing. We know that spending time outdoors in nature is good for you. It's inarguable. There's plenty of scientific journals about it and articles about it, and we know instinctively I quite like going for a walk.
Yep.
But that connection is the bit that matters. I think in a more practical level, I'll probably talk about some of the work we do in education. So the kind of classic approach with young people in litter was to get a whole bunch of young people, stick them in fluorescent jackets, give them a litter picker and march them out the front door. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what you can do is also go beyond that. It's almost like a functional response to a problem.
Yep.
But actually what we need to do is turn that into a deeper learning experience. Don't waste the opportunity of, you've got young people, you've got them organized, you've got them out. What else can you do with that experience? So when we do, particularly some of our marine litter activity, we work closely with a number of engineering companies. And what we get them to do, because they will have STEM ambassadors, those ambassadors are trying to promote science, technology, education, environment and maths. And what we're really trying to get them to do is give them a challenge. So for young people, in the River Clyde, which is the river that flows through Glasgow, we asked them to come up with machines that would collect litter out the river. And you can just imagine the spectrum of creativity from a 5-year-old all the way up to, someone in a final year in secondary school in Scotland who's got, Technic Lego prototype ready to go. All of that is valid, but the one thing that binds it all together, it was good fun.
Yeah.
So we're turning into, quite a bad, difficult issue in terms of the environment and the social issue, but actually turning it into something fun. So making them feel that they can tackle it. Equally, we had a fantastic art project as well, looking at the kind of issue of litter and what young people unleash in that area is fantastic. But also we talked to them about material in itself. Why was plastic used for this particular item? Yeah. What alternatives were there? What else can be done? And that helps, I think, a better understanding for young people at a kind of basic level about why something like a deposit return scheme might be a really useful thing. But equally, if you're going to go into manufacturing as a career, then and there's going to be thousands of jobs continuing to be in that space, you can influence that by choosing different materials, by thinking how you design out, because that will be your experience in the workplace. When you go into that workplace, actually, I think there's lots of examples of where organizations really are trying to change the type of material that they're using. So let's not make that part of the education experience.
I love it. Yeah. So taking something again really tangible, but using that to kind of build out from with different, experiences and educational opportunities. Uh, let's talk a bit about you, your job, your career. But I'm going to change gears ever so slightly. Now, one thing that connects quite well to what we just talked about, I think, is it according to LinkedIn, and correct me if I'm wrong, you started as chief executive officer in around March 2020, which was right at the start of COVID. And thinking about people connecting to nature, well-being, walking, there was quite a transformation for a lot of people just going out and being part of nature and realizing it's important for our own being. And actually, there's a lot to see and kind of gain from that. Where to start? Well, let's start with you and your job. Like what's it like to do your job? What is a chief executive officer? What's a typical day, week look like? What does success or failure look like in your task? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. It's it really is a privilege, and with that privilege comes some great highs, some lows, and most of the time, in the middle, what you're just observing is brilliant colleagues engaging with the community-based organizations and other partners that we've got, and you're just watching something really positive happen. So absolutely, first and foremost, it really is a privilege.
Yeah.
The challenges come from as an organization that's independent from government, although we receive some funding from government. And what's important to us is we have an independent voice. We're still able to point out where we think we could do things slightly differently and make progress. But at the same time, we also have to put together a program of funding for all the programs that we run that allows us to be here, that allows us, and also to offer an excellent place for people to work. And I think you'll be speaking to, I'm sure, quite a few charity organizations that are finding that quite tough at the moment. And I don't want to pour into a woe is me conversation, but it's tough. And I think there's no difference of quality in what my team are delivering at the moment. They're doing exceptional work. But looking for that next opportunity, looking for that next funding is very much a big part of what we do. So looking ahead, seeing which way the wind is blowing in terms of funding, whilst also trying to maintain an high an interest and momentum on the issues that really, really matter to us too. That is certainly a challenge. You mentioned COVID, and then obviously lots of people had a really tough experience during COVID, and I acknowledge that, and possibly some people within my organization. I started, as you say, 2 weeks before the UK shutdown. I changed career, I changed city where I worked, I moved house, and there were certain times when I thought, I'm not entirely sure I'm the right bit. But I think what was fascinating was for us as an organization, it was, as it will be for lots of work, an impetus for doing things differently. And I was really impressed how the organization embraced that. And I think as I literally walked out the door and I said to my operational managers, I said, this is the time to give something a go. You'll definitely be remembered for giving it a go. People will totally forgive you if it doesn't go quite, so they'll just understand why you tried to do something differently. And a great example of that, a practical example, because, this isn't just about, we all moved to home. A practical example of that was we started a series of live lessons in our education team.
Yeah.
And at the height of that bit of COVID, when young people were sitting at home and teachers were probably looking for a bit of support, we reached 12,000 people now. 12,000 in the context of Scotland, to give your listeners some idea of numbers. Every year in Scotland, so there are about 70,000 14-year-olds in Scotland, 70,000 16-year-olds, that kind of level.
Yeah.
It's quite a big number.
Yeah.
But when you actually watched it in practice, we delivered that over Teams, MS Teams. And, we had contributors from different countries, but we had young people sitting on those carpets in classrooms in front of a smart board, and we were joining up. Some people might think Scotland's a relatively small country, but you've pointed out now, some of the distances between our communities are absolutely enormous because of geography as much as distance. So young people in the Isles of Shetland, and I mean the Northern Isles of Shetland, Western Isles, and the middle of Glasgow and the middle of Edinburgh, brought together around a lesson about a skate fish.
Yeah.
I mean, and if someone had come to me before and said, I've got this great idea, I think I would, as a chief executive, would probably point out all the problems. Whereas what we did was we said, no idea, let's give this a go. And that endures to this day, Nick. We just finished Scottish Climate Week last week, and the engagement we had with young people right across the country was absolutely fantastic. So again, it was really, for all we look back, with not much joy towards that time, I think an acceleration of change and a different way of doing things and fresh set of eyes on how this can be delivered has certainly been a way in which we've responded here at Keep Scotland Beautiful.
Yeah, and I've read through your strategy, and innovation comes through, and it's really what you're talking to there. What COVID aside, you walk in the door, new chief executive. Did you have a plan about how you wanted to lead the organization? Some people talk about a 100-day plan. I'm just going to listen for the first bit or whatever. What did you have an approach? Did you have a strategy yourself? Talk that through. I'm really interested. Yeah.
Let's go to that classic 100-day plan, because I remember speaking to a trustee about 30 days in. I said, you're going to have to give me a wee bit of an extension on this 100-day plan because of what happened with COVID.
Yeah.
But I think what was actually interesting was probably it just completely shifted how I was going to approach it. And actually what I did was, because we were all working from home at one point, I had individual conversations with colleagues.
Yeah.
Genuinely, and I don't want to make this sound soporific, I genuinely was interested in making sure they were personally okay.
Yeah.
Because I'd met some of the so kind of odd situation. But equally, it was an opportunity to ask them a question about what do you think Keep Scotland Beautiful is? And I think, and none of this is negative, Nick, but if, when I listened to that, I described it as a blizzard of stuff. I mean, maybe you thought I was describing a blizzard of stuff earlier in terms of the programs of work and whatnot. But for me, what was really important was we needed to make Keep Scotland Beautiful a bit easier to understand. Which bit of the environment sector are we about? And which audience are we trying to connect with? And I think internally, that was as much as about being comfortable about not being across every bit of the environment. You don't have, we can't possibly be across. And there's, Scotland benefits, I think, from being a relatively small country. So we meet our colleagues in other environmental organisations on a fairly regular basis, and just being comfortable about the space and the audiences that we're trying to grab. And I think that was important to me. It was literally telling people that. So we've got a big enough challenge with the audiences we're after. You're doing a great job. But I think for me, it was trying to make Keep Scotland Beautiful a bit more digestible in terms of how you received us. So we thought a little bit about how we create a strategy. And my greatest achievement is always creating a strategy that fits on one piece of paper, one A4 piece of paper. And you can go and look at the website and see that. But part of that was trying to describe what we're about. We're not an organisation with, as you say, a relatively small number of, although we're delighted to have 45 colleagues. But what we're about is inspiring change. So that's what we talk about. We're here to inspire and also amplify inspiring activity. So again, whether that's through a hotel that's taking steps around their sustainability journey, through to a local authority that is increased its volunteer engagement in the local park. For us, that is exactly what our organisation is about: is inspiring people, A, to take some action on the environment, but B, to amplify that and make sure other people see that. My wife she's not now, but she was a guide dog instructor. I don't know if this is too tangential for you, Nick. But when I asked her about how does that work, how do you because I mean, it seems such a complex thing getting a dog to work with someone who's visually impaired. I mean, to me, it's incredible activity. And she said, how do you train the dog? She says, it's dead easy. You praise the behavior, not the result. You focus on the behavior, not the result. And I've kind of carried that with me through just the work that I'm doing now. But, whether I'm, doing things in other parts of my life, the bit that matters is whether people are doing things slightly differently, because actually then you've got them, but you're actually watching the change take place. If it's simply about they've got the certificate and then you move on, I don't think we're connecting the same way. So inspiration, positivity around the environment matters greatly to me. And I think we've certainly looked at that and brought that forward through our work over the last number of years.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. When you're hiring staff as an organization, like what do you look for in people? Yeah. Or who stands out as right for the organization, a good fit? Are there certain skills or character traits, or speak to that as you will? Like, what is it that, makes people brilliant and you want them?
Yes, it's an interesting one. I guess, to capture it in a short sentence, we're probably recruiting more generalists than specialists. Now, having said that, we've just recruited a data officer, so which is a real specialism. But I think for us, the ability to engage with the public is really critical.
Yeah.
And so the next question is how do you demonstrate that? And I think, and throughout my whole career, I do look at things like, have you worked in hospitality? Have you sometimes seen how tricky the public can be at times? But also, volunteering and different ways in which you've demonstrated your passion, but also had to influence others. So an ability to present a concept positively and win people over, and therefore probably a bit of endurance, probably a bit of resilience, really, really matters. Passion for the subject naturally is great. But I think almost a passion for being able to want to see a whole community change. I mean, I see that a lot through our communities team, where sometimes they're dealing initially with people, and we've slightly covered this, but with people who are not really talking about the environment. They are, they just don't know yet. But actually the ability to create trust, create a space where people feel connected to us as an organization, develop that confidence with us, we think allows greater things to happen. So that critical ability to develop communities of interest really, really matters when people come towards us. Yeah. And I have to say, we've been thrilled with the kind of quality, the enthusiasm, and also how people have come to our organizations and left for a whole number of different reasons. But I've taken, maybe some of the experience I've taken here, and then talk positively about it in their next employer. And I love that. I think it's one of the best things about the voluntary sector. Opportunities are, I think you possibly get a bit more opportunity to take a bit more leadership in a role, take a project in a way that you want to take it, that reflects your passions and interests. And hopefully you get real life experience in that subject area or in that approach, in that, for instance, behavior change.
Yeah. Wonderful. When you look back at your career so far, Barry, what have been some of the roles that you've held, or maybe even what have been some of the kind of pivotal moments you think that have really, on reflection, helped you to get to where you are today? I mean, it might not have felt like a very straight line. Very few careers do, but what stands out to you have been really important? Paint us a bit of a picture, please.
Yeah, well, hopefully this will be a short sort of recap. So I had a huge, and still do have a huge passion for working in the outdoors. And so I have a great privilege of being a leader in the outdoors. But I ran, at 26 years ago, I ran a SEAL training organization called Ocean Youth Trust, which was about taking 12 young people on a boat and exploring the west coast of Scotland. And I think what you learn is a real healthy understanding of risk and reward. And it actually came up in an interview question, and maybe it was inappropriate, but I'll share it with your audience anyway. One of the trustees for Keep Scotland Beautiful said to me, "What's your appetite for risk?" And maybe it was too long in the interview, but I responded, "Well, taking a number one jib sail down in the middle of a 4-6 off the west coast of Hebrides is real risk." So maybe it was a bit flippant, but I think there was some element of truth in there around, you know, if you be brave, of course you've got to think about what you're doing, and of course you've got to create the right environment for success. But fundamentally, if you don't want to get seasick, sit under a tree.
Yeah.
At some point, you've got to say, "Let's go. Let's get this done. So let's execute a plan or a thought or a program or whatever it is." And that requires leadership. And my concept of leadership, I'm really surprised how often it's challenged. I genuinely believe leadership is everywhere in an organization. It's not some people who happen to have a title. Everyone can display leadership in their particular role that they play. And every good organization knows that good administration matters. It just does. And people who administrate and do the communication function and pay wages and create the right environment for staff to do their job properly are incredibly important people. So in the context of this conversation, Nick, the fact that happens to be within the conservation of the wider nature and climate sector, you still need to run your organization well. And that allows people then to be successful in a kind of forward operational role. So to me, leadership really, really matters at all levels, I would say. I also when I left the SAIL training organization, I worked for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which again, many listeners will know. It's also a very big international program around the world. It's sometimes not always called the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, but it is international. I think you're going to be surprised what I'm about to say. I learned when I became director for Scotland for that organisation, data really matters. And data allowed me to ask the right questions, which allowed me then to get more people taking part in the programme. So I'm not a scientist. I did okay at maths, but I wasn't a genius. But now I've developed this kind of strange love for it, because I think the world is challenging, difficult. And goodness knows we've got some examples where science becomes less important, and I don't want to stray into any more than that. But good data should allow people to ask much, much better questions. So where are you getting your data from? What is it telling you? Is it a good benchmark to allow you to see whether the intervention you've made has made a difference? Yeah. So I actually learned that through the Duke of Edinburgh's Award and how we were trying to tackle a lack of participation in particular target groups in particular geographic areas. But the importance of taking a moment, understanding what the real picture is, and then applying the things that you're good at to make the difference, but also being realistic and honest about whether they had worked. So did the intervention work? And why did it work? Or an even better question, I think, for leaders is, where do you not need to spend your time? So if something's working well, if a community or organization, do you really need to spend as much time as you think in that space? Now, sometimes those relationships, particularly if you're in a voluntary organization, can be really important to you. You like those relationships. You like spending time with people who are like-minded. Yep. But actually, you have to question whether, and I think sometimes they don't need so much of your time. Actually, what we need to do is go and spend some time with people that have yet to experience that level of our love, care, and empathy, and interest in what they're trying to do as well. So I think there are a couple of maxims that would take forward. Yeah. And then I think in the role I'm playing in terms of what I've learned is that you need to try and find space for people to unleash their own creativity. Now, it needs to be done within in a space of there's a job to do, we need to do it. But I think people really want to not just have a voice. I think that's a bit trite. It's much more about, I think, I've been very fortunate to see incredibly creative people. How do you unleash that? And how do you allow people to, get that space and time within their job to say, well, let's go work it up and trial it and have a look and see if it works. So, again, it's important. I hate the word, fail quickly and move forward, but failing is such a loaded word. Yeah. I don't think fail is really the right, you never fail. It's never useless space. No. It's learning space, isn't it? Yep. So I wouldn't use the word fail. I would use learning. Yep. Let's learn quickly and move on. But it's always been worth doing in my experience.
Yeah. feels quite agile, your approach. Yeah, sort of data driven, learn quickly. Yeah, learn the lessons, move on, see what the data's showing us, quite analytical. Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago, you've just hired a data manager, was it, or a data
Yeah.
officer? Is that because you're seeking to apply similar lessons within Keep Scotland Beautiful now? Is that their role, or have I totally
No,
misaligned that?
it is a replacement role, Nick, but it is the nature of that role is changing. So we do a particular piece of work, which is in effect the independent report in Scotland on whether
Yep.
litter and pollution is increasing or not. Newsflash, it's increasing. So which is why we're so passionate about it. But to do that, there's a methodology,
Yep.
there's a scientific approach, and we're doing something in that space.
Got you.
But at the moment, we believe that there's a slightly different way of looking at this as well. So we've also working with the local university here. Our office is based in Stirling. We have a fantastic university here in the city.
Yeah.
We're looking at an AI-based project and camera technology to see if there's different ways in which we can gather data, in which we can interpret data and understand what's actually going on within our local environment, which is a big part of what we do. So counting items matters.
Yep.
Is it? Because your intervention of items is completely different.
Yep.
So let's take food and drink on the go. So typically going to a food outlet, whether it's a well-known brand or not, that type of litter has a particular audience. General litter has a different audience. Cigarette-related litter has a completely different audience as well. Now that's inconvenient because it's expensive when you're trying to reach those audiences, but it's the truth. And I think it's important that you don't just go to a community and say, here's your one-stop shop for just litter in your area, because it's unlikely to work. Our approach is do some pre-audit work, and let's hope in the future that'll be with a much more of a digital support behind it, and that helps us understand the intervention that we think will be better suited to make the impact that we think we can make. So we're trying to refine that, and also trying to make it better for local government, local municipalities whose budgets are really stretched. How do we deploy resources better? So it's an exciting area of work. In some ways, it's like a roller coaster train. And we don't know which way it's going to go, but it feels exciting to be in that space. But probably with a fairly skeptical view of what can happen as well. Just for the sake of the record, we know that data is a massive issue in AI. So the approach that we're taking is that the system will capture a report and then doesn't need to hold on to the data. So within that project, we're also beginning to understand the kind of carbon footprint that would be associated with that type of work. So we're carefully considering that, but it is new technology. It's a new way of thinking. So we're learning as we go.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sounds exciting. As we start to sort of wrap up the conversation, you've already shared lots of careers advice. I mean, the interview's been like, I was going to say littered with it. That would be a terrible word to use.
I like it. No, that's funny.
What advice would you like to give someone? Perhaps they're a young person in Scotland, actually, and they'd like to go into a leadership role, and perhaps they'd like that to be in sustainability or something related. Let's say they're 18, that sort of age. Have you got any particular advice to someone like that? Things they should bear in mind as they, step out into their careers and think about their future?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know I've been lucky to follow lots of passions in my career, and that's translated into jobs that I've really loved doing, and I'll put it out there. But I think my love of probably landscape is where I've generated. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a scientific background, but I have experienced a large number of the kind of natural environments we discussed earlier. We're very privileged to have, and so I care about that, and I think that's enough in some ways to be able to interpret that. So when you come to an interview situation, that you're talking from a point of direct knowledge. I'll never forget. I don't know if this is useful, Nick, but bear with me. I once did a mock interview for a friend of mine who she was actually going for a role as a teacher, and as part of her letter, she said, I really think the values of this school are really important. So in the mock interview, I said, what are they? And she faltered and stumbled. So it's a classic example of, hopefully it links back to what I just said. If you're going to say it, then you need to really understand it, or you need to, do your homework. So, but that passion for, if you have a passion for nature, well, how are you going to describe that? And, I think it goes beyond, I've read a book recently. I've been immersed in it, and I can see the challenges that go along with it. I think also there's a lot of it's incredible amount of information now that was probably, and that creates its own challenges as well. But that ability to research organizations and find out what they're really about. My organization would be delighted if you phoned up and said, "Could you tell me a little bit more about it and what is it you do?" So when genuinely organizations offer the ability to speak to them about their role, I would definitely take it. I would genuinely work out what the role's about.
Yep.
I think our experience, I think we touched on it a bit recently. Sometimes in our sector, you can get fixed term roles. I understand the problem of fixed term roles. It's a period of time. It's a
project funding.
You are looking for a permanent contract. I understand that. But in answer to the question, should I work in, forgive me, food retail as a stopgap or take on a 6-month contract? I think it's a no-brainer, I'm afraid. I think that ability to get that practical experience is incredible. And in a related area. So we've had lots of people come in on short-term contracts in our campaigning team.
Yep.
It has kept them massively attached to the environment sector, but they've not necessarily gone on to another campaigning job. They've gone on to perhaps a more nature or climate related role.
Yeah.
So I think these opportunities are worth looking at, even if you'd be really keen, as we all would be, and I understand that, to get a permanent contract. Don't dismiss it. It's like the best. I was going to use the word internship. I mean, I feel a bit funny about interns because I think in balance, I probably wouldn't do an internship because it just feels a huge lack of equity for lots of people who can't really afford to work for nothing, and so for that reason we probably wouldn't. The converse of that is we do try as much as possible to offer particularly school work experience opportunities, which are, I guess, are relatively short. I think in Scotland, I would love to see that better organised. I think, and I think government and public bodies could help in that space. How you create opportunities for people who might want to end up in environmental jobs, whether in local government or public sector, but they've had an incredible rich experience coming through organisations such as ours. I think is generally something worth thinking about.
Wonderful. Yeah. I just want to ask a few sort of more broad questions then as we sort of start to wrap up a bit more. First one is a short question. How easy it is to answer? It's for you to say. You're very well travelled. If we could take you anywhere in the world and you could see any species or re-see any species, totally up to you. Where would you like to go? What would you like to see?
And I know when I say this, I'm going to sound really conceited, but it's genuinely true. We weren't supposed to go to Galapagos. We were sailing between Panama and Tahiti, but we had to go to the Galapagos to pick up additional fuel for the boat for reasons I'll explain in a different podcast. We were there for 24 hours. I mean, what a ridiculous scenario.
Yeah.
The species abundance in that tiny archipelago, and I was there for 24 hours. So frankly, I would like to go back with the permit. I understand all that. And genuinely have the time to enjoy what that incredibly place was. So I remember the black iguanas and the blue-footed boobies, but I was there in undue haste. And so I'd certainly like to go back there with a bit more time. But on the basis that I sailed out to New Zealand, I guess what I'm really trying to do is go New Zealand, Australia, up and over, and back home to the UK the other way. So who knows what Papua New Guinea would have in store, and Indonesia and Malaysia would have in store. Those kind of places really appeal to me in terms of, because I was brought up in an island. I understand that people think there's lots of Scottish islands. They'll all be they're nothing like each other. Famously, Jura, which is almost less than a mile from the island of Isla. They couldn't be more different. One island is 200 people, the other one is 3,500 people on it. They're just completely different places. So I love that ability. It's like a sort of chocolate box or selection box of places to visit, and each one has its own species, its own history, its own its own story to tell. So I love that, and that's why I like sailing.
Yeah. Wonderful. I hope it happens for you. Yeah, it sounds
Thank you.
fantastic. Yeah. Um, Well, when you think about the future of Scotland's environment, are you feeling hopeful? How are you feeling about the future right now? Obviously, we're facing all sorts of threats, and
Mm.
we hear lots of concerning stories. But how are you feeling about the future?
I think I am feeling positive in that I think there's a listening ear. I think people I think and it's not just us, obviously. I mean, I pay tribute to an incredible wide variety of organizations and indeed political leadership. I think sometimes it's easy to say politicians don't get it. But I think there's a reasonable consensus that's been developed in the country that understands that this stuff matters. That our country is at the forefront of some of this stuff, particularly rise at sea levels. For the Western Isles, I mean, they could be really devastated by it, and everything that kind of matters to Scotland. So I think the political leadership exists. I think there are massive challenges in terms of um, our contribution to net zero. I think is slightly hampered by certain communities feeling that they've got no choice but to accept a change in energy, or certainly visual impacts of for instance, wind turbines, but they're not necessarily a significant benefit from that. And I think we do need to, and I'm sure all countries will be similar, where you're making huge investment as a country, genuinely as a country, but actually not seeing the benefit of that at a local level and indeed within your own family.
Yeah.
So it'll be no surprise to you, Nick, that it's colder in Scotland because we're a wee bit closer to the North Pole. And we're generating this massive amount of energy, but the bills are just as high and the transmission charges are disproportionate. Now, not everyone understands that because no one's always interested in the intricacies of the energy market. But it does seem to me that for particular communities that are doing huge amounts of, done a lot of acceptance, actually the benefits haven't swung perhaps back yet in the way they should. So I think that causes me some concern, because I think there is an opportunity for Scotland to do incredibly well in terms of electrifying battery storage and other forms of alternative forms of energy, perhaps more quickly than others. But I think people need to feel that benefit a bit quicker up front.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question. If we could make you a global leader for the day, Barry Fisher, you're a global czar, and you could enact one new law or decree or whatever you want to call it that, that would benefit the environment or climate change or pollution, or whatever it is you want to tackle. The ball's in your court, really. Like, what would you like to see happen?
Well, obviously, I would ensure that I would complete my circumnavigation under law, Nick. I mean,
Well, that's done. That's
a
locked.
start.
Yeah.
I think perhaps more cerebrally, I think there is. We're deeply passionate about litter and pollution in this organisation.
Yeah.
We have been a huge, impact on wildlife, if nothing else. And I think we need to think much more carefully and much more honestly about the type of material that we keep on churning into the environment. So whether that's a global deposit return scheme as a first off, or perhaps something a bit more meaty in terms of reduction use of plastics.
Yeah.
That's definitely the area I think that needs to be tackled. I mean, the damage that's already being done is significant, but it feels like something we can do something about with the technology we have.
Great place to focus on. Barry, it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you again for your time today. If people want to find out more about your work, or particularly about Keep Scotland Beautiful, perhaps they want to get involved, where should they send them? Where should we send them? Where should they go?
Yeah, listen, we're absolutely delighted. We've got a website, www.keepscotlandbeautiful.org. And there's tons of information in that space around those 4 subjects that I talked about.
Yep.
But delighted to speak to anyone. My email's there as well. And happy to engage with anyone who wants to speak to me directly.
Great. We'll make sure links are shown in the show notes too. Once again, thank you, Barry.
Thanks. Really enjoyed it, Nick.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also, please give us a rating or a review because it really helps us to get in front of more people. And we really enjoy reading them all. As you'll have heard, our podcasts are now recorded in front of a live audience who sit in and listen to the chat. And then after the mics are turned off, they get a chance to talk to the host, to share their thoughts, and also to ask questions. It's a really great format. If you'd like to be in the audience, all you need to do is join the Conservation Careers Academy. Now, in the Conservation Careers Academy, you'll get full access to the world's biggest conservation job board, listing over 15,000 jobs, volunteer and internships across the globe each year. You'll also enjoy access to our amazing CC Pro private members community with regular events, networking and support. Plus, you'll get full access to our growing library of career boosting resources, guides and templates. And best of all, it only costs a few dollars, euros or pounds per month to join the Academy. Now, to find out more, please visit conservation-careers.com/academy or simply click the join button at the top of our website. See you on the inside.